likes to this videos? If we make 5,000 likes to this video, we will upload more patriotic news. Thank you. Marijuana politics emerge as 2020 Flashpoint. Marijuana legalization just moved from the fringes of the last presidential campaign to center stage in 2020. Between a sweeping new package of legislation introduced last week by one of the top Democratic presidential prospects and, on the other end of the spectrum, Attorney General Jeff Sessions' vigorous opposition to recreational use of marijuana, the debate over legalization of cannabis is about to receive a full airing on the presidential campaign trail. While Bernie Sanders also supported medicinal use of marijuana and the decriminalization of recreational marijuana, drug policy stayed on the outskirts of the 2016 presidential debate, and the growing action at the state level was barely acknowledged. Tom Angel, chairman of Marijuana Majority, a bipartisan nonprofit advocacy group, said New Jersey Senator Cory Booker's introduction of the farthest-reaching bill ever proposed will have a catalytic effect on the politics of legalized marijuana and the myriad criminal justice issues related to it. Booker is getting a ton of fantastic press about this, he said. And other candidates will notice that and will want to say, I agree, and I want to introduce a bill of my own. Booker's rollout of the Marijuana Justice Act, introduced to a wide audience via Facebook Live, was more than just a call for legalizing marijuana at the federal level. The measure also addresses withholding federal funds for the construction of jails and prisons from states whose pot laws are shown to disproportionately incarcerate minorities, expunging federal convictions for cannabis use, and mandating sentencing hearings for prisoners now serving time for pot offenses. You see these marijuana arrests happening so much in our country, targeting certain communities, poor communities, minority communities, targeting people with an illness, Booker, the former mayor of Newark, said. With Republicans in control of the House and Senate, the ambitious legislation is viewed as unlikely to pass. But its attachment to a top prospective 2020 candidate, and the growing action on marijuana legalization at the state level, all but guarantees presidential contenders will need a fully formed position. Several possible presidential candidates, Booker and New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, have already signed on to a separate bipartisan medical marijuana bill. In Massachusetts, where voters approved a ballot measure last year legalizing recreational marijuana, Senator Elizabeth Warren has addressed the issues of creating legal and secure banking for the cannabis industry. On the Republican side, Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky has called for a repeal on the pot prohibition, making him popular with young libertarians, and won some conservative backing with his strong stand for states' rights on the issue. That's the same stance that was endorsed repeatedly by President Donald Trump, who also enthusiastically backed medical marijuana legalization on the campaign trail, though many cannabis advocates now worry about Sessions' hardline opposition. Booker's effort has already earned kudos from some on the forefront of the legal cannabis industry like Jim Patterson, CEO of California-based Ease, which calls itself the nation's fastest-growing cannabis technology firm, one which already boasts 20-minute home delivery services to medical marijuana patients in markets like San Francisco. We admire his bravery, Patterson said. He is taking a powerful stand and we need more politicians who are willing to be bold. We welcome Senator Booker's call to action, said John Malanka, co-founder of the California-based United Patients Group, a national organization that specializes in promoting cannabis education for patients, doctors and adult users. Malanka, who was recently invited to Capitol Hill by the recently formed, bipartisan Congressional Cannabis Caucus to advocate for safety and quality issues, said that the senator's move may now spark great opportunity for both parties to work together on something that has a groundswell of support. Yet it's also likely to force a fulsome debate over the marijuana issue in the run-up to the 2020 presidential election. Already, in the two governors' races on the ballot in 2017, New Jersey and Virginia, the Democratic nominees have staked out clear positions in favor of decriminalization. Polls clearly show that legal access to cannabis is the future, says Malanka. If you are against medical cannabis access, or against cannabis legalization, you're already in the minority. A recent CBS News poll tracked 61% support for legal cannabis, a 5 percentage point bump up from last year, and the highest percentage ever recorded in the poll. And nearly 3/4 of Americans now support a states' rights approach, that states should be allowed to make the decision on legal pot sales, and oppose government moves to crack down in states that have legalized cannabis, the poll showed. After California officially became the largest legal cannabis market in the world last November with approval of Prop. 64, Nevada, a key western swing state, followed last month to become the 5th state to legalize recreational use of the drug. States are hungrily eyeing tax revenues from the cannabis market, where revenues topped $5.8 billion in 2016, and are expected to conservative reach $7 billion by 2020, experts say. Willie Brown, the former California House Speaker and San Francisco mayor who successfully carried one of the nation's first cannabis-related reform bills to decriminalize the drug in 1973, says the political climate has shifted markedly from the days when we couldn't talk legalization, hell no. But he notes Booker wasn't the vanguard Democrat to understand how deeply the issue of legal recreational cannabis resonated, especially with millennial voters. Gavin Newsom was the first, he noted, saying that the California Democratic Lieutenant Governor stepped out in front and backed legalization of recreational pot in the nation's most populous state nearly 2 years ago. Newsom's strong endorsement and campaigning helped pass Prop. 64, and set the stage for him to take the frontrunner spot in the 2018 governor's race, Brown noted. In recent days, Newsom's rival, former Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa, has edged toward a more liberal stance, saying at a public forum that cannabis is going to be the new alcohol business. State Treasurer John Chiang, another California gubernatorial candidate, has been holding statewide hearings on cannabis banking issues. Even California Senator Kamala Harris, a former prosecutor who has taken a more cautious stance on the issue, is on board for marijuana decriminalization. Harris, a first-term senator who is frequently mentioned as a prospective presidential candidate in 2020, told a progressive group last month, "While I don't believe in legalizing all drugs. We need to do the smart thing, the right thing, and finally decriminalize marijuana." Attorney General Jeff Sessions opens federal probe on Charlottesville. Attorney General Jeff Sessions called late Saturday for a federal investigation into the day's racially charged violence in Charlottesville, Virginia. The violence and deaths in Charlottesville strike at the heart of American law and justice, Sessions stated. When such actions arise from racial bigotry and hatred, they betray our core values and cannot be tolerated. I have talked with FBI Director Chris Wray, FBI agents on the scene, and law enforcement officials for the state of Virginia. The FBI has been supporting state and local authorities throughout the day. U.S. Attorney Rick Mountcastle has commenced a federal investigation and will have the full support of the Department of Justice. Justice will prevail. The setting for the mayhem was a mass protest by a group of white supremacists, who were hollering racist and anti-Semitic slogans. Among those in attendance were former Klan leader David Duke and Richard Spencer, president of the National Policy Institute. One person was killed and at least 19 injured when a car slammed into a crowd of protesters. The vehicle's driver was identified as James Alex Fields Jr. of Ohio and he was charged with second-degree murder, among other crime. Others were injured in fighting during the day. Any time that you commit an attack against people to incite fear, it is terrorism, said National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, speaking Sunday on ABC's This Week, who also referred to it a criminal act against fellow Americans. Later, 2 state troopers were killed when their helicopter crashed. They were identified by the Associated Press as Lieutenant H. J. Cullen, 48, and Burkham M. Bates, 1 day shy of his 41st birthday. The circumstances were not immediately clear. Any time that you commit an attack against people to incite fear, it is terrorism, said National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, speaking Sunday on ABC's This Week. President Donald Trump condemned the violence but had made it clear he blamed not only the white supremacists but others on the scene. "We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry and violence on many sides," the president said. Other notable Republicans declined to follow the president's lead, choosing to be specific in their condemnations of the white supremacist groups and their behavior. "The Nazis, the KKK, and white supremacists are repulsive and evil," said Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz, "and all of us have a moral obligation to speak out against the lies, bigotry, anti-Semitism, and hatred that they propagate." Having watched the horrifying video of the car deliberately crashing into a crowd of protesters, "I urge the Department of Justice to immediately investigate and prosecute this grotesque act of domestic terrorism." Speaking Sunday on CNN's State of the Union, Senator Cory Gardner, "Our Colorado, call it for what it is. It's evil." He repeatedly referred to the incident as domestic terrorism. "We just aren't seeing leadership from the White House," Michael Siner said on CNN's State of the Union. Trump's words did draw support from a pro-Nazi website, The Daily Stormer. "Trump comments were good. He didn't attack us. He just said the nation should come together. Nothing specific against us." Sessions' statement was accompanied by one from the United States Attorney's Office for the Western District of Virginia and the Richmond Field Office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Richmond FBI Field Office, the Civil Rights Division, and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of Virginia have opened a civil rights investigation into the circumstances of the deadly vehicular incident that occurred earlier Saturday morning. The FBI will collect all available facts and evidence, and as this is an ongoing investigation, we are not able to comment further at this time. Obama, Clinton call for introspection in wake of Charlottesville clashes. Democratic leaders responded to reports of violence and racial clashes at a white nationalist rally in Virginia on Saturday with calls for introspection on matters of racial hatred. Former President Barack Obama sent a rare tweet Saturday night quoting civil rights icon and anti-apartheid revolutionary Nelson Mandela in an apparent response to the violence in Charlottesville, stressing that love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. Obama, who has largely strayed from making public comments since exiting the White House in January, took to Twitter to quote from 1994 autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom, on a day mired by racial violence and tension in the state of Virginia, including the mayhem caused by a car barreling into a crowd of protesters. "No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love, for love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite," the former president wrote in a series of tweets, quoting Mandela's 1994 autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom. Hillary Clinton, Obama's former Secretary of State and the 2016 Democratic presidential nominee, chimed on Twitter by calling on political leaders to be strong in their words and deliberate in their actions in the face of Saturday's upheaval. "The incitement of hatred that got us here is as real and condemnable as the white supremacists in our streets," Clinton tweeted. "Every minute we allow this to persist through tacit encouragement or inaction is a disgrace, and corrosive to our values." Former Vice President Al Gore took a more blunt approach, directly criticizing President Donald Trump's response to the violent clashes. "Mr. President, for the sake of your country, I would urge you to try again," Gore said in response to Trump's address on the matter. "Mr. President, I would urge you to give more thought to what it means to have a resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan and Nazi movement marching and creating this kind of hatefulness." He added, "The country would be better served if the president would come back before the people and think of a more thoughtful and appropriate statement about how we can understand what's going on in America and how we go forward." Hundreds of protesters clashed with white supremacists during a rally in Virginia, resulting in the deaths of 3 and injuries of dozens more. The rally, held to protest the planned removal of a statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee, is believed to be the largest gathering of white nationalists in over a decade, according to the Associated Press. The driver of the vehicle that plowed into the crowd was identified as James Alex Fields Jr. of Ohio. He was, according to the Associated Press, charged with second-degree murder and other charges. Trump addressed the violence from his golf resort in New Jersey on Saturday, saying he condemned in the strongest possible terms this degree of hatred, bigotry and violence, on many sides in display in Virginia, adding that he found the situation very, very